Today, protesters clashed with police in Washington again. And tonight, we'll find out what they're fighting for and why it's worth shutting down parts of the federal government. Plus, former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich, has harsh words for the Bush campaign. But is anyone listening? And today, for many, it's a mad dash to beat the midnight tax deadline. We'll see how much Bush and Gore would change your bottom line next year. Reform presidential candidate Pat Buchanan joins us for all that and more next on Equal Time.
Live from Washington, this is Equal Time for Monday, April 17th, 2000. Here are Ali North and Paul Begala.
Good evening and welcome to Equal Time. 5,000 protesters came to Washington to shut down the international finance meetings. They failed. They did, however, manage to create a traffic mess and shut down several government agencies. So, what's the fuss all about? The World Bank and the International Monetary Fund are institutions that give loans to poor countries. But the protesters say the banks are unfairly controlled by wealthy nations like the United States. They also want past loans to poor countries to be forgiven. And they want more attention paid to the environment when these international banks fund development projects. The protesters have made an unlikely ally of our first guest, Reform Party presidential candidate Pat Buchanan. He joins us front and center to talk about this and other developments in this upcoming election. And filling in tonight for Paul, the lovely and liberal Ms. Kiki Moore, also a Democrat strategist. Now, before Kiki has a piece of you, today the protesters gathered out there. You spoke to this group right there on the lawn of the U.S. Capitol last week. This group has within it people who believe that the United States is a bad country. I actually talked to some of these people, Pat. You don't share that belief, do you?
I not only don't share that belief, I was not speaking to that group. I was speaking to Teamsters folks. I was speaking to steel workers. I was speaking to auto workers down here who are protesting most favored nation treatment for the People's Republic of China while they're persecuting Christians. I would think you would have been out there speaking to that group, Ali. This gang down there at the IMF and World Bank who are in the streets, there are a lot of anarchists. And no, I was not out there with that.
But you're not a big backer of the IMF or the World Bank.
Well, the IMF and the World Bank, the reason I'm against them is they take American dollars, lend them overseas, and dictators steal the money, and then we pay off the debts here in the United States as taxpayers.
These protesters out in the streets today are saying they want the debts forgiven. You can't be supportive of that.
Listen, I do. Look.
You want the debts forgiven?
No, let me say this. Kiki, we're not going to get the money back from those poor people down there in Mali. However, we ought to get an accounting of who stole it, looted it. It's hundreds of billions of dollars. I've been against this for years. Find out who stole it and looted, try to get it back, and who made the stupid loans.
Pat, let me ask you a question. You said in an interview this week that you found that these protests and this debate around the financial ministers' meetings to be a chance for you to bring your candidacy back into the headlines again. Is your position on this more political rather than really about policy? Because I have a hard time really genuinely believing that you're for forgiving the debts.
Well, no, look.
Because that's what those kids are gathered around together for.
Well, let me just say this. Look. You can't get the debt money back from the people. They never got it in the first place. Like Mobutu. He stole tens of billions of dollars. The people didn't get it. I am not for going after the people, but I'm going after the dictators, yes. Try to get back every dime from them. Find out who lent the money. Fire them. But ultimately, look, Kiki, we're going to have to pay it off.
But do you think these protesters have been effective in their effort to raise the debate?
Well, look, there's no doubt they put a focus on the IMF and the World Bank, but they're unfocused in what they're trying to do. Some of them are concerned about, the deforestation of the Amazon rainforest. Some of them are concerned about different issues. To me, the IMF should be shut down. The World Bank should be shut down. They're World War II agencies. They're taking American money and spreading it all over the world.
Do you think that it was effective or worth it to have these protests? Do you think that that was actually an effective tool for addressing the end game that you want, which is the shutdown of these agencies?
Well, look, I agree with the protests. I don't agree with violence. I agree with the protests against the WTO because they should not have the right to veto American laws. So we disagree maybe on some incidents, but on objectives, I agree with.
Well, I'm with you 100% on the issue of WTO membership for Communist China. In fact, the WTO ought to fit within that broader rubric of
That's right, Ali. Let's make sure we isolate them and never hear from them again.
I'm not an isolationist.
Oh,
I believe in free trade for free people. I think that's basically your stand as well. If it's real free trade and the people are really free and we're not being held to some standard that other countries are absolved from, that's basically the Buchanan
My view is
stance.
all that. First, I believe in free trade with free traders. I believe in fair trade. But Kiki, you know what? We took last year 40% of China's exports. They took 1% of ours. They had a $70 billion trade surplus.
But part of the trade agreements being expanded are making sure that we can move forward on this. This is actually an amazing moment. I'm the Democrat on set with, well, a Republican and a former Republican, I guess, if that's the appropriate language to use. Far be it from me to be the fair trade and the free trade gal at the table, but I guess I am tonight. So what I don't understand, I find both of your positions to be absolutely isolationist. If we don't engage in China, if we don't engage in these other countries around the world, the only way trade is going to expand in China is if we engage in them.
Well, look. Obviously, I was on Nixon's trip that opened up the People's Republic of China.
That's right.
We need diplomatic relations. I'm in favor of trade relations. I'm in favor of engagement. But if they're persecuting Christians and using trade surpluses they get from us to build rockets and point at us and point at our friends, you tell them, look, fellas, this is not what we have in mind. We want free and fair trade with a country we can deal with peacefully.
But you would lift sanctions on Iraq.
I would lift sanctions against the people of Iraq, what we can sell them in terms of consumer goods. I would like to sell China more.
And you think it's been effective in Cuba?
I think during the Cold War...
It's really toppled that Fidel Castro guy.
Look, we won the Cold War by a Reaganite policy toward the Soviet Union, a policy of denial. We didn't give them MFN. We didn't bring him into the WTO. We didn't bring him into Kaplan.
And you ignored the economic developments, and that's why we didn't have the economy we should have had during those Reagan years.
What are you talking about? Look at the recovery effort. It all started with Ronald Reagan.
The recovery effort started with Ronald Reagan.
Listen, why did poor Mondale get slaughtered? 49 states. If Reagan didn't do a good job...
got slaughtered because Carter was too arrogant, and in the end, it's been the Clinton-Gore economy that's brought us to a great opening for the 21st century.
She wants to deal with history. Let's deal with the future. There's no doubt that you went out there and made a very popular appeal to the Teamsters.
Exactly.
Her buddy, Al Gore, the inventor of the Internet, he is basically in a lip lock with the leaders of the American labor movement. They are going to tell their members to turn out for Al Gore this fall. It's not going to help you a bit, is it?
Well, look, the leaders I disagree with, but it's those workers, those Teamsters cheered me. The steel workers in Weirton have endorsed me. They're working class folks who are losing jobs. Ollie are with me. The big guys want to be at the table. They think Gore's going to win. But I'll tell you, Mr. Gephardt's going to come out next week and apparently join Pat Buchanan and oppose permanent, most favored nation treatment for China at this time. Kiki, what is wrong with putting it off until at least they stop threatening Taiwan?
Well, you know what? It's about keeping to put it off and put it off and put it off that's messing up things. But I want to ask you, you are one of the premier politicians of this decade and in modern politics. I will give you that compliment because it's true, and you'll take it gladly, I see. One of your colleagues, a current Republican former office holder, Newt Gingrich, spoke to a group of folks down in Richmond this weekend, and it's reported that he says George W.'s campaign just ain't ready for prime time. They're not ready to go. What do you have to say about that? You think?
Well, I mean, I don't criticize. I mean, Mr. Bush is leading Mr. Gore by 9 points. My disagreement with Mr. Bush, though, is not that he's not running a pretty good campaign. I think he is, but that he's a Xerox copy of Al Gore. Now, even on abortion, the Republican Party is moving Ollie. He goes down and meets with the gay rights folks. So
was that a bad move?
Well, look, what he's saying is, look, it's a matter of indifference whether you're for or against on these issues. These issues don't matter anymore. It's raising the white flag in the cultural war for the soul of this country. And even you can't agree with that, Ollie. I don't believe you do.
Yeah, but Pat, here's my question.
You didn't call me for advice, Pat.
If those people leave George W., do they become a part of your now broadened alliance? Do you see the kids on the streets in Washington today joined up with those folks who are mad at George W. for maybe picking a pro-choice vice presidential nominee?
Again,
that would be sort of an unusual dinner party.
I'm not in favor of violence in the streets, but I tell you this, the Teamsters and those working people, if you tell them that you're right to life, they don't walk away from you, and I'm right to life. And quite frankly, if you tell them that, you want a foreign policy that keeps us out of wars, it's none of our business.
Do you disagree with Governor Ridge in Pennsylvania that the Republican Party platform ought to be at least open so that people who might have a disagreement choice issues?
Well, look,
have a
I'm
chance
not in
to
the
present
Republican
their-
Party, but I
Republican Party
helped write.
platform.
Well, he helped build the Republican Party to what it is today. He brought a lot of people to
But
it.
in 1992 and 1996, I said that I would endorse a Republican candidate only if they kept the party pro-life.
And do you benefit from the fallout from this?
I'm not looking at benefit or anything like that because this is too important an issue. But if the Republican Party walks away from the unborn, then the American people and the pro-life
let me
folks
Is the
will walk
Reform, is the
away
Reform Party
from the
the, Pat, is the
Republican Party.
Reform Party the new home of the Right to Life Brigade?
The Right to Life folks should vote for the strongest Right to Life candidate in this race, and you're talking to him.
Pat Buchanan, let's talk about that Reform Party just for a second.
Sure.
At some point in the not too distant future, you're going to have to pick a running mate. The only other politician to go out and talk to this group that gathered here to protest the IMF, the WTO, trade with China, was Ralph Nader of the Greens. Ralph Nader.
Well,
Pat
Nader's
Buchanan?
got his own ticket. He's on his
Oh, I
own
understand.
party. He's not on a Buchanan ticket, no.
But at this point, my dear friend, he leads you in the polls.
Well, look, at this point, Ollie, I've been working for 4 or 5 months, day in and day out, trying to get on the ballot in 50 states, trying to raise money in small gatherings, trying to win delegates to this convention. I've been all over this country. You'll see our work bear fruit in August when I'm on 50 states. With due respect, my good friend Ralph's not going to be on 50 states. He'll be lucky to be on 15.
Pat, let me ask you one quick question on
He'll be
this.
on California.
On this day of Great American Tradition, Tax Day, which
Right.
tax plan? Quickly.
Bush is far better than Gore's, but Bush is grossly inadequate. Look, we
What's
ought to.
yours?
I tell you, my taxes?
Yeah.
Every single dime of that $2 trillion in surplus that's not for Social Security ought to not be collected but given back to the American people. That's what it is.
Pat Buchanan, thank you so much for being with us tonight. Have a good week on the campaign trail. Coming up next, post offices across the country are bustling tonight, full of last-minute tax filers. And we'll debate how Gore and Bush want to lighten your tax burden next April. But first, this Equal Time Extra. In case you're wondering how much they're paying this year, the Gores made over $240,000, paid about $60,000 in taxes, and donated about $15,000 to charity. The Bushes, filing for an extension. We'll be right back.
Get the Equal Time newsletter, where Ollie and Paul offer their unique perspectives on all things political. To subscribe, go to our website at equaltime.msnbc.com. Violent tornadoes, surprise snowstorms. What's causing the wild extremes in the nation's weather? On the news with Brian Williams tonight at 9 on MSNBC.
How do you want to fly? That's the question Delta's been asking. Because different people want different things. Every passenger has a request. What would yours be?
Announcing the world premiere of the all-new Chevy Tahoe. More power, more room, more SUV. It's nowhere near anything. Chevy Tahoe, like a rock.
Mr. Simpson, name the finest preschool in your area. Calculate the future cost of an Ivy League education.
I have no idea.
Well, here's a clue.
Got questions about your child's education? GE can help. Our Education Solutions program offers mutual funds and expert planning for everything from daycare to college.
I thought this would be a nightmare.
Not when you do your homework.
Are you ready? What if you want to stop working for a living? What if you want to start living for a living? What if you want to do it sooner, not later? Scudder Investments can help to prepare you for what you want or whatever comes. Contact us or your financial advisor. What if? Be ready.
What do you get when you cross a talking snowman, popular teenage killers, and a man-eating monster? Multimax from Cinemax. 3 big channels packed with entertainment. This month, Max fires up hip movies, intense thrillers, non-stop action, and an all-star first on Max crime comedy. And on More Max, catch a different classic every day at 4, trendy Vanguards on Tuesdays, and a double feature on Sundays. Ta-da! Call 1-800-547-4DTV to order Multimax today.
These eyes see things that other eyes can't even imagine. These eyes have seen streaking receivers, blitzing linebackers, adoration, admonishment, and challenge. With NFL Sunday Ticket on DirecTV, your eyes will see the glory and the story of 13 games every Sunday of the regular season. Use your remote, tune to Channel 213, and order NFL Sunday Ticket today. Because the eyes have it.
Al Gore believes the surplus is the government's money. I believe the surplus is the people's money.
It's no coincidence that George W. Bush was pushing his tax cut plan on tax day. Welcome back to Equal Time. The Texas governor and the vice president are proposing very different tax cuts for the new millennium. George W. Bush is calling for cuts of more than $480 billion, while Al Gore says that's too risky. He wants a cut in the $250 to $300 billion range. The cuts would come from items like changing the current bracket structure to eliminating the marriage penalty tax. Joining us now front and center to talk about which plan is best, Democratic strategist and Gore supporter Peter Fenn, and Ken Blackwell, the Ohio Secretary of State and the former national co-chair for Forbes, who now supports Governor Bush. Mr. Blackwell, have you filed your taxes today?
I sure did.
And will you do better next April under Mr. Bush or Mr. Gore?
Clearly under Mr. Bush, because Mr. Bush understands a fundamental principle. It was the American working people, America's working families that earned that money, and they deserve to get some of their money back. And as a consequence, Mr. Bush is not playing the politics of division as Mr. Gore and Mr. Clinton have for the last 8 years. He's playing the politics of multiplication, a lesson learned not only from Calvin Coolidge and Ronald Reagan, but John F. Kennedy. They understood that if you cut taxes, cut marginal tax rates, you could grow the economy, create jobs, and create opportunity.
Ken, what do you say to critics of the Bush plan who say now he's cut taxes, eaten up the surplus, can't pay for his health care plan, and so overall his economic plan is an absolute washout?
Well, I think what the governor understands very, very clearly is that he has called for setting aside $2 trillion over the next 10 years to help with the funding of Social Security and reducing the deficit. What he's basically saying is that over the next 10 years, why can't the American people, have 1/4 of that surplus? They created it out of their genius, out of their sweat, out of their hard work. Give the people their money back.
Ken, that's not what this guy believes. See, Al Gore apparently, Peter, believes that it is the government's money first. Let me just ask you a basic question here. Basic question. Do the American people deserve a tax break or not? Yes or no?
The American people are getting a tax break under the plan of Gore's, but let's look at this. This is a risky, outlandish tax scheme.
You know, the Gore tax scheme.
No, we're talking about Mr. Blackwell's buddy's tax scheme. In fact, if you look at what John McCain said about this, and when he was looking at Social Security, he said there will not be 1 cent to save Social Security out of that plan.
Am I the only person who just noticed you did not answer my question?
I
absolutely answered your question.
If you want to help folks in the lower middle class, go to Gore. If you want to help folks in the middle class go to college with Hope scholarships, go to Gore. If you want to help the folks who make over $200,000 a year, let me just tell you, you go to the website, go to the Bush website. It's hilarious. You'll see it stops at 100,000. You know why it stops at 100? Telling people what they get? Because if you make $200,000, you get a $51,000 tax hit.
Let's take a look. We have to take a look. We've got the Bush website up. This is a great thing Peter raises because Bush is out there touting his plan.
I didn't know you had.
Folks can go on his website, pull it up, but only up to $100,000. So the DNC, the Democratic National Committee, Ollie, today, and Peter and Ken, said, you know what? we're going to show you what the really wealthy in this country, the kind of break they're going to get, gratis of George W. Bush. They've got their website up for the millionaires so that they can see what they're going to save. Ken.
Kiki, if you and Peter can stop pounding the table for a second. If you look at the Bush tax plan, it takes 6 million working families off of the tax rolls. What it does for a single mother with children, a working mother, it in fact says that she can earn $31,000 without paying any federal income tax. That is liberation. That is fairness. That is, in fact, a tax plan that is geared towards helping those with the lowest incomes in this country. Now, look, that's not play the politics of division.
Here's my beef.
Let Peter respond.
Just one second. Here's my beef, Ken. For the last 30 years of my life, I have struggled to get to the point where I actually have an income. I looked at my taxes this year. I am paying to the federal government, to their Clinton-Gore administration, 40% of everything I make goes to the federal government. Now, let me ask you this. Since you don't want to give rich fat cats like me a break, having struggled, I used to make $305 a month.
You're not complaining. You're not complaining.
I am complaining.
You're not complaining.
Since you want to punish the people who work very hard,
no,
and 40% is not enough.
What is enough? 50%? Let me give you some numbers here, because I want to respond to Ken's point. Ken, this is really an interesting point, because if you are in that lower 20% of the tax bracket, you probably know the answer to this. How much do you get back a year under the Bush plan? $48.
No.
40. If you're in the lowest 20%,
Peter, if you're working family.
I want to raise a point here. I want to raise a point for Ollie and for Ken. Ken, this is about risky.
Let me answer this question.
Ken, this is about the difference between risky and responsible. You can use all the facts and figures you want, but I still don't understand how he saves Social Security, how he pays down the debt, how he pays for a health care plan that every newspaper in America has said he can't afford to because he spent it all on a big old risky tax scheme. And in fact, Al Gore believes in tax cuts that are targeted to the working class, to the people who have earned them, so that we can still make sure our seniors are safe and that we can fund our kids in an education system.
Let me just say that Kiki, that's a kooky assertion. Let me tell you, if you really believe that, you believe Al Gore invented the internet. The reality is quite simple. Look, there's an old adage in economics that says if you want more of something, subsidize it or don't tax it. If you want more of something or less of something, you tax it. If you want harder work, if you want harder working people, you in fact allow them to keep more of their income that they earn from their work.
But here's the central
Bush understands that simple fact. He understands that the prosperity of America belongs to working families.
Okay, but Ken, here's the central point here. The American people know what this tax scheme does, and that is it puts Social Security at risk. It puts the balanced budget at risk. It puts funding for education at risk and for health care at risk. And the difficulty is whether
$1 trillion aside for that.
Wait a minute.
Yes,
let me just finish.
Go ahead, Peter.
62% of this tax cut goes to those who make over $200,000 a year. That is not fair. George W. Bush right now, who just announced today that he had $1.3 million in income, his tax cut for this would be in the neighborhood of $75,000 with his tax scheme. I think that's too much. I think it should go to the lower middle class and the middle class, the real working people of this country, and not jeopardize Social Security and Medicare.
And that's why you will support the Bush tax plan. The simple fact, Peter, I gave you a chance. The simple fact
you got to wrap it real quick, Ken.
Is simply this. This is a plan that returns the money back to the working families of America. And we understand that if you want more personal liberty, you want smaller government, and that means that you give the people their money back, not government.
Ken Blackwell.
George Bush understands that the threat is keeping that money in Washington.
Ken Blackwell, I want to thank you for taking time to join us tonight. Peter Fenn, thank you for taking time to join us tonight. I sure hope George W. Bush will lighten my tax burden next year.
Well, how about if you file your taxes, Mr. Extension?
For those of you still seeking personal tax info for this year, check out the tax section of our website at MSNBC.com for tips on filing your returns and extensions. Coming up next, those other protesters outside Elián González's house waiting for word on a key court ruling. We'll fill you in when Equal Time continues.
Next hardball, he's one of the greatest generation, and he knows how rough the race for the White House can be. We'll talk to former Republican presidential candidate Bob Dole next on MSNBC.
America's worst prison riot.
Prisoners told us they would kill everyone.
Inmates take hostages and make demands.
We're talking about change the conditions inside the prisons.
So what happens when requests are ignored and communications break down? From the standoff to the aftermath, hear what really happened in the deadly rebellion of Attica. Crime Files. Tonight at 8 on MSNBC.
What do you know? What don't you know? How do you propose to find out? The power of J.P. Morgan. Wealth Management Online.
A soybean crop yields a more bountiful harvest. A patient has a medicine she needs. A boy can survive a childhood disease. A cotton crop helps protect itself from certain pests. Because discoveries in biotechnology, from medicine to agriculture, are helping doctors and farmers to treat our sick and protect our crops. An American farmer will produce a healthier grain, and an African farmer can provide better for his family. Because biotechnology researchers test and test to find new solutions. Solutions that are improving lives today. Solutions that could improve our world tomorrow. To learn more about biotechnology and agriculture, visit our website or call our 800
number. Change is everywhere in the world of business, which is okay until change comes crashing at your feet. Well, that's why you call Fast Signs, where from banners to building signs to window graphics, our sign solutions tell people who you are and what you do. Or rather, what you do today.
What do you want? Who do you care for? How do you want to be remembered? The power of J.P. Morgan. Wealth Management Online.
Welcome back to Equal Time. You're looking at a live shot of the crowd outside Elián González's house, where it's been a quiet day in the Elián González drama. Everyone involved, including these protesters, are eagerly awaiting a key court decision on whether the child can leave the United States while legal appeals are being worked out. A decision on this could pave the way for the INS to remove the boy from his Miami relatives. And last night on national television, the boy's father, Juan Miguel González, lashed out at the relatives, accusing them of child abuse and using Elián against him. That's it for tonight. I'm Ollie North.
I'm Kiki Morin for Paul Bagala.
And I didn't mean to cut you short. I'm
That's
sorry.
all right.
I mean, that's just...
No, we gotta
are we
go.
still
Time
on?
is running.
Are we still on?
MSNBC is a presentation of NBC News. More Americans watch NBC News than any other news organization in the world.